right, so was that easy? Yes or no? Yes. All right, let's have a little conviction here. Was that easy, yes or no? Yes. Thank you. Who noticed that there's different levels of attention that you're getting from different people? Anyone? How did you notice that? Body language, eyes, just a sense, right? Whatever that is that you're doing, that's what you need to be building. That's your instinct. That's why Anthony can say, without a shadow of a doubt, that he'll know before he starts the induction who's going to be a great responder. Does that make sense?
And just to put that in perspective, as I look out at a crowd like this, I have no idea who's going to be a good responder. I cannot walk into a room and spot good subjects. I've got to find out by testing them out a little bit.
By giving them little suggestions, little instructions, little feedback. It's the feedback that tells you what's going on. Does that make sense? Is that easy so far? Yeah? Okay, here's the next step. So you have their attention. You introduce yourself. We'll do the whole same thing. Hi, I'm a hypnotist. You want to try some hypnosis?
Sounds
Fantastic. Come over here. Have a step. Fantastic. Look at me. Just focus on my eyes. That's right. Now, we have the fixation of attention, right? This is the point you've gotten to. The next thing is, what I want you to do is just cup your hand and hold the back of his head. A lot of you are familiar with this already. I just want you to hold the back of his head. Nothing else. Just hold the back of his head, okay? No yanking, no pulling, no turning the head off and kicking the football around. Just hold its attention and hold the back of the head here. And just wait for a few seconds. You'll notice, especially when you're the subject, that it changes something inside you. Just notice what that is, and we'll talk about it afterwards. Is that okay? All right, guys, you have 1 minute to do that to as many people as possible. Off you go. Okay, that was easy, right? What did you notice when someone was staring at you, and at some point put his hand in the back of your head and carried on staring? What happened inside of yourself as the subject at this point? What kind of things? Say again? You felt more connected. What else?
Weird.
A little weird, right?
So did you feel weird what? Weird uncomfortable? Surprised?
Yeah.
You remember earlier we spoke about emotion. You know, even if it is, what's happening, why is his hand on my head? That's still a raising of emotion. So it's still useful.
What is this? Some more things. What was that? You found it calming. Okay. What else did you find out of this?
It did kind of feel like it started as an altered state of consciousness.
It started feeling like an altered state of consciousness. So what you begin to do here is we're beginning to hold bypass of the critical factor. Right? The weirdness you felt, that altered state of consciousness, the comfort, the connection, all these are signs that something like normal reality is no longer working, some kind of special reality is starting to work. Does that make sense? So really, the induction has already begun, although it may only be a fraction of a second that you bother with that or do anything like that. Does that make sense to you guys? So I saw a couple of you do something very interesting here as well, which is when you had the person there, you carried on with this whole swaying and testing sort of thing, because as Anthony was saying earlier on, your testing never stops. Another way to think of this is as a feedback loop, right? And the feedback loop is constantly cycling. The minute you stop sending back the feedback, in other words, cycling that feedback loop, that's where trance either stops or weird things can happen because now you're no longer in the experience, you're just observing an experience. Does that make sense to you guys? So you're always alert to that feedback loop.
Another point I'm going to make is that in any kind of hypnotic encounter, even if it's a cozy therapy room or a booming club, it doesn't really matter. At some point, you have to become the dominant party in that relationship. And again, some people misinterpret that as being overbearing, authoritarian. That's not what I mean. I mean it more like in a doctor-patient relationship, you trust that he has certain expertise. If he's asking you to swing your arms around and do silly things, there's probably a reason, even though you might not know what it is. And this little step of just touching the back of the head, I normally just place one finger on the back of their head, is a physical way of immediately becoming the dominant party in this situation. They'll assign a value to what you're doing. They'll put some meaning on what you're doing, and they're now kind of just poised, waiting for your next direction, your next instruction. It's not going to come from them because they haven't really been in this situation before. So you're the dominant party, and you're going to just continue to direct their experience. Okay?
All right, so let's do something with this now, shall we? So you've got to the point where you've moved them around, you have all the rest of it, you have their attention, hand is here. You can get to this point easily enough, right? All I want you to do now, and this is just a setup for something a little bit later on, what I want you to do now is move their forehead into your shoulder, right? Note, I'm not pulling, I'm not forcing, I'm just gently guiding his forehead into my shoulder. Now, that may come with a whole bunch of balance, just give me a whole balance with it.
Right.
So I may have his whole body. Notice how I have to take a step back if his whole body comes into me, right? Or I might just have a token sort of nodding of the head, and he still have most of his balance. It doesn't matter. The point is two things. Number one, if you're getting the whole balance, please take a step back, plant your leg on the ground, because you're responsible for that person's balance at this stage. Does that kind of make sense? If you're a very small person and you have a very large person, this may not be the best mix, right? Do you know what you do at that point? Please, have a chair, sit down. You can still do it. Do you have to sit down just to show them? So even if there's a big weight and size differential, you can still do the same thing. Just look at me. Let's turn this chair sideways so everyone can see properly. Okay, so you guys can see properly here, yes? You guys in the back can see all right? Okay, you still have the same differential. The size differential has been taken care of now, hasn't it? I can still have both hands, just look at me. I can still have the cupping, and then just bring it forward. Just because they're sitting in the chair does not mean you can't do the same thing. Does that make sense?
This point about balance is another soft test at this point. It's not that they have to go off balance. It's not that I particularly want them leaning on me, and I'm not certainly not trying to pull them off balance. I'm trying to get them to that balance point. I'm trying to get that person so they trust this process enough that they're happy to give me their entire body weight if that's the idea that they're picking up. So that's another nice little test. If I was to just touch the back of the head and you just leant forward with your body weight.
That's a very receptive person. Makes your life a lot easier.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, there's a quick question over here. Go ahead. So the question is, what do you do if you're on the street and there's no chair, right? We'll come on to that afterwards. There's lots of different inductions. Let's just get one out of the way first, and then we'll deal with those sort of things after. But trust me, there's lots of other ways of dealing with that, okay? Any other questions?
Do you have a question?
Go, 1 second. Over here first.
I noticed it is much more uncomfortable if I'm right-handed and somebody asks me to go to the left.
So you notice that it's more uncomfortable if he's right-handed and someone asks you to go to the left. Some people feel more comfortable one way. So the question is, does it make difference which way you turn them?
If you're left-handed to go to the left.
So the question is it easier to turn one way or the other? It'll be different with each person, so I wouldn't worry about that. The key thing is, if that person's level of discomfort is interfering with the process, then you have to do something. Otherwise, I don't think it's exactly. You'll get used to it over time, and you'll notice if someone feels a little bit uncomfortable one way, you might try the other way. Just play with that. That's the easiest thing. You want to add something?
You had a question, didn't you?
Well, I was just going to thank you for the chair demonstration, because as a short lady, I've been avoiding a lot of the tall guys in the room. Because it's like, I have to be up on my tiptoes to get my hand.
I was on my tiptoes last night, shouting in a pro tennis player's ear. But he still ended up completely hypnotized. So.
Okay.
You're the hypnotist. You can do, and you just change the environment to suit you at that point, right? Very quickly.
Permission to touch their head comes from the blind.
Right. Well, actually, the whole thing is an escalation. Notice that I start touching with the handshake, then I put my hand on the shoulder, say, would you like to step over here? If I'm having problems with my hand on the shoulder here, do you think I'm going to go for the whole induction or the head, anything like that? No. It's a very different thing. Is he standing over here now? Notice how I've got both hands on his shoulder now. That's even more dominant. I'm actually inside his physical space. I'm invading even further. I've got his eye contact and so on. If he's going to allow me to do this, then unless he has issues around being touched on the head, which some people do, then there really won't be no. It's implied in the whole process.
Exactly, and just put this in context. We're starting you slap bang with an induction.
There'll be lots of other things you can do.
Approach, set up, and all that kind of breaking into their physical space. We just decided to start with the action, and we'll get to setting out.
We'll get to all kinds of other things later on as well. The thing right now to do is just treat this as a training wheel exercise. A lot of you will actually stick with this for many years to come because it's fun and it's easy to do. There are lots of other variations as well, so don't worry about that too much right now. And one very important thing to bear in mind is, if it can go wrong, at some point it will, right? It's just life. So as long as you take it with a good spirit and go, oh, I'm sorry about that, don't worry about it. Come over here, sit down, we'll do it a different way, right? Then it's totally relaxed, it's totally chill, and people tend to be quite good with that. And honestly, if they're still not good with that because you touched them on the head and they really didn't like it, and even though you apologize and tried another method, then actually thank your lucky stars, boys and girls. Thank your lucky stars, because that's probably a person you do not want to be hypnotizing in public. unless they're paying you a lot of money to overcome some kind of trauma, which has to do with being touched in the head and all the rest of it. Does that make sense?
And
so it's kind of like a built-in test.
And the other thing is, the shoulder is just as good as the head. So if they've got lots of hairspray, or for some reason you don't want to touch their head,
there's lots of ways you can do
they
it.
don't clean their hair, just
for now,
use their shoulder.
For now, let's keep it very simple, and we'll elaborate on that as we go along. All good? Okay, so what do we have so far? We have the handshake, the introduction, we have the first compliance test, we have the second compliance test with maybe a little bit of rocking if we need to get into it, we have the fixation of attention, and we have the hand on the back of the head, right? Now what we're going to add is bringing their head forward onto their shoulder. Now, notice a couple of important safety tips. Those of us wearing some eye adornments, this is not a good idea to bring that head forward, because crushing those glasses against the eyes is not really a recipe for happiness, especially out there in the real world, all right? So if someone's got glasses, just say to them, can I borrow your glasses? Or could you put your glasses somewhere safe for a moment, please? Don't take your glasses off just now, by the way, just because you're hearing this. Keep them on. It'll give them a chance to actually practice taking control of the glasses. Does that make sense? Make sure those glasses are somewhere where they feel safe with them. Maybe in their pocket. If it's a quieter environment, like a dinner party or something, maybe on the table. In a bar or club, don't put it on the table, because they might get more concerned about what's happened to their glasses and so on. Does that kind of make sense? But take care of that person, and notice that the part of their head that's going to touch your shoulder is right here on the forehead, nothing below, right? So you want to make sure that you're guiding the forehead into the shoulder. That way there's a nice balance point. Is that easy? Okay, off you go, guys. Just take a minute doing that now.